What would you do if a racist cop targeted your loved one? Imagine receiving a call that your daughter, full of dreams and aspirations, has been unjustly arrested. Would you feel anger, fear, or the urge for revenge? How would you react if the system, meant to protect, turned against your family? In today's video, we dive deep into a shocking story that exposes the harsh realities of racism within law enforcement. You'll witness the gripping tale of a black FBI agent whose world is turned upside down when his daughter is wrongfully arrested by a prejudiced cop. What happens next will leave you questioning not only the lengths a father will go to protect his child, but also the broader implications of systemic racism. As we unravel this story, you'll learn about the challenges faced by individuals fighting against discrimination, the emotional toll it takes on families, and the critical importance of standing up for justice. You might be surprised to discover just how pervasive racism can be in our society and the power dynamics at play that often go unnoticed. But that's not all. We'll explore lesser-known facts about the relationship between law enforcement and communities of color. Why does this continue to happen? And what can be done to change it? This video isn't just a narrative. It's a wake-up call to everyone watching. So stick with us till the end. You won't just hear a story of revenge. You'll witness the resilience of a father's love and the fight for justice in a world that sometimes feels overwhelmingly unjust. By the time we reach the conclusion, you'll have a better understanding of the complexities involved in these situations and why it's essential to speak out against injustice. Are you ready to embark on this journey with us? Let's explore the depths of this shocking encounter and the repercussions that follow. In a bustling city, where sirens often drown out the sounds of laughter, lives a father who has dedicated his life to serving justice. Agent Marcus Thompson is not just any FBI agent. He's known for his unwavering commitment to fighting crime and upholding the law. With a badge that symbolizes authority, he carries the weight of his responsibilities on his shoulders. Each day, he steps into his office with a burning desire to protect the innocent and punish those who abuse their power. But beneath his strong exterior lies a heart that beats fiercely for his family. Then there's his daughter, Jada Thompson, a bright and ambitious college student. Jada has dreams bigger than the skyline of their city. She's passionate about art and wants to make a difference in the world. With a talent for painting that reflects her vibrant personality, she envisions a future where her work inspires change. She's the light of Marcus's life, the reason he pushes through the challenges of his demanding job. Every day, he watches her grow, proud of the woman she is becoming. But in the shadows of their seemingly perfect life lurks a threat. A cop named Officer Derek Wallace, known for his aggressive tactics and disdain for anyone who doesn't fit his narrow view of society. Wallace has a history of troubling encounters. He's the type of officer who sees the badge as a license to intimidate, believing he is above the law. The whispers of his racist behavior echo through the precinct, but fear of his wrath keeps others silent. One fateful afternoon, as Jada walks home from a gallery exhibit, her mind is alive with thoughts of her future. She is excited about a new project that could showcase her work to the community. The sun is setting, casting a warm glow on her path, and she feels hopeful. But just a block away, the atmosphere shifts. Officer Wallace is parked on the side of the street, his eyes scanning the area like a predator watching its prey. Suddenly, a misunderstanding ignites a spark of tension. Jada stops to help a friend who has fallen off his bike, and without warning, Wallace approaches. With a booming voice, he accuses her of loitering, his words dripping with disdain. Confusion floods Jada's mind as she tries to explain the situation, but Wallace is not interested in her story. His temper flares, and he drags her away, disregarding her pleas and the innocent nature of her actions. In that moment, Marcus receives the call that shatters his world. "Agent Thompson, we have a situation." The voice on the other end says, urgency lacing every word. Marcus's heart races as he listens to the details. His daughter, his precious Jada, has been arrested. Anger bubbles inside him like a volcano ready to erupt. He races through the city, his mind racing with thoughts of injustice. What kind of monster would treat his daughter like this? The memories of her laughter, her dreams, and their father-daughter moments flood his mind, intensifying his resolve to protect her. This isn't just a random arrest. It's an attack on his family and everything he stands for. The clock is ticking, and Marcus knows he must act fast. He feels a mix of fear and rage, a dangerous combination that fuels his determination to confront the cop responsible. As he approaches the precinct, a sense of dread grips him. He can't shake the feeling that Officer Wallace isn't just any cop. He's a man who hides behind a badge, using it as a shield for his prejudice. The battle lines are drawn, and the stakes couldn't be higher. With Jetta in a holding cell, and the truth twisted by a racist cop, Marcus prepares himself for a fight that will challenge not only his skills as an agent, but also his very soul. The day began like any other for Jada Thompson. The sun spilled through her bedroom window, and the aroma of fresh coffee wafted through the air, stirring her awake. She could hear her father, Agent Marcus Thompson, already bustling around the house, preparing for another long day at the FBI. Jada admired her father. He was her hero, dedicated to making the world a safer place. Little did she know that this day would alter the course of their lives forever. After classes, Jada decided to stop by a local art gallery to showcase her latest pieces. The gallery was filled with vibrant colors and lively discussions about the power of art. As she mingled with fellow students and artists, Jada felt a sense of belonging. This was her world, a place where creativity thrived. But outside, in the gritty streets, danger lurked. As Jada left the gallery, the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows down the alleyway. It was here that she spotted her friend, Ethan, who had fallen off his bike. Without hesitation, she rushed to his side. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern etched across her face. Ethan, nursing a scraped knee, nodded but winced in pain. "I think I can walk," he replied, trying to sound brave. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A vehicle rolled to a stop nearby, its headlights cutting through the dusk like daggers. Officer Derek Wallace stepped out, his uniform crisp and intimidating. Jada's heart sank. She had heard stories about him. Rumors whispered in the community about his aggressive nature and disrespectful attitude toward people of color. Wallace's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene. He approached, his demeanor radiating hostility. "What's going on here?" he barked, as if addressing a group of criminals instead of a young woman helping her friend. Jada felt a rush of adrenaline. "Just helping my friend," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He fell off his bike. But Wallace was not interested in the truth. His face twisted in contempt as he spat out accusations. "Looks like you're just hanging around, causing trouble," he sneered. Jada's confusion morphed into fear. "I'm not causing any trouble. I'm just helping him," she protested, her voice trembling as she fought back tears. Instead of listening, Wallace escalated the situation. He reached for his handcuffs, the metallic clinking sound echoing ominously in the still air. "You're coming with me," he declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. Panic surged within Jada. "You can't do this. I haven't done anything wrong," she cried, her voice a mixture of disbelief and desperation. But Wallace's face remained cold and unyielding. He yanked her arm, pulling her towards his patrol car, while Ethan looked on in shock, unable to comprehend the rapid turn of events. As they reached the car, Jada's heart raced. She felt the oppressive weight of injustice pressing down on her. The world around her blurred as she struggled to grasp what was happening. Why was this cop treating her like a criminal? She was a student, an artist, not a thug. But in Wallace's eyes, she was nothing more than a target, someone to assert his authority over. In the distance, the city buzzed with life, but for Jada, everything had come to a halt. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random arrest. It felt personal, a manifestation of the prejudice that so many in her community faced. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists, as Wallace shoved her into the backseat of the patrol car. As the door slammed shut, Jada's heart sank. She could feel the heat of humiliation wash over her. She had heard stories of young black men and women being treated unfairly, but she never thought it would happen to her. In that moment, all her dreams, her future, everything felt out of reach. All she wanted was to be safe and to pursue her passion for art. Instead, she found herself trapped, a victim of a system that seemed designed to oppress. Meanwhile, as Marcus received the phone call informing him of his daughter's arrest, he was engulfed in a whirlwind of emotions. The calm demeanor he had maintained while at work crumbled, replaced by a raging storm of fear and fury. He raced to the precinct, thoughts racing through his mind. Who was this cop? What could he possibly do to protect Jada? Each red light he encountered felt like an eternity, his mind playing out scenarios of what was happening to his daughter. The image of her in handcuffs haunted him, and he gripped the steering wheel tighter. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away, that every second spent on the road was a second too late. When Marcus finally arrived at the precinct, he felt a surge of determination. He would not let this injustice stand. The clock was ticking, and as he stepped inside, he steeled himself for the battle ahead, ready to confront the officer who dared to threaten his family. As Marcus Thompson stormed into the precinct, the weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a harsh glare on the tiled floors. He could feel the tension in the air, a mixture of anxiety and dread swirling around him. The normally bustling environment felt eerily quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of the storm that was about to unfold. The receptionist looked up, her eyes wide with concern. "Agent Thompson," she said, her voice shaky. "I heard about your daughter. I'm so sorry." He barely acknowledged her words. His mind was racing, focused solely on finding Jada. He needed to see her, to make sure she was safe. He had faced countless criminals and dangerous situations, but this felt different. This was personal. He marched past the front desk, ignoring the whispers that followed him. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. A uniformed officer glanced up from his desk, hesitating before gesturing toward a small room at the end of the hall. "She's in interrogation," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's heart dropped. Interrogation. The very word felt like a knife twisting in his gut. With every step he took toward that room, a mixture of anger and fear surged through him. He thought of Jada, his little girl, facing a situation no one should ever have to endure. The thought made his blood boil. The thought of that racist cop, Officer Wallace, treating her like a criminal ignited a fire in his chest. As he approached the interrogation room, Marcus heard muffled voices. His instincts kicked in, and he leaned closer to the door, trying to catch snippets of the conversation. "You need to learn your place, girl," Wallace's voice rang out, filled with disdain. "You think you can just roam around acting like you own the street." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. His fists clenched at his sides, every fiber of his being wanting to burst through that door and confront the man who was bullying his daughter. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open, and the sight before him fueled his fury. Jada sat at a table, her wrists still red from the handcuffs, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. And there was Wallace, standing over her like a predator, a smug expression plastered across his face. "You're not going anywhere, little girl," he sneered, relishing his power over her. "Get away from her," Marcus shouted, his voice booming through the room, drowning out the tension-filled air. Wallace turned, surprise etched across his features. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" he replied, attempting to regain his composure, but Marcus could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm her father, and I demand to know what is happening here." Marcus stepped forward, the protective instincts surging through him. He felt the weight of his badge as an agent and a father collide, creating a potent mix of authority and emotional turmoil. Jada's eyes widened, relief washing over her as she caught sight of her father. "Dad, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't do anything wrong." Marcus's heart ached at her vulnerability. He turned back to Wallace, who was trying to regain control of the situation. Wallace straightened his back, attempting to assert his dominance. "Your daughter was causing a disturbance," he said, his voice dripping with false authority. "She was loitering and being a nuisance." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Loitering. She was helping a friend. He shot back, the anger in his voice rising. "You've crossed the line, officer. This is not justice. It's abuse of power." The tension in the room thickened, as if the air had turned electric. Wallace's expression hardened, and he stepped closer to Marcus, attempting to intimidate him. "You should know your place too, Agent Thompson. This is my jurisdiction," he spat, trying to assert his authority despite the growing realization that he was no match for the fury of a father defending his daughter. But Marcus was unyielding. "Your jurisdiction does not give you the right to treat my daughter like this. You think you can get away with your racism and bullying because you wear a badge." He leaned in closer, his voice a low hiss. "I will not allow it." The confrontation escalated, both men standing toe-to-toe, their eyes locked in a fierce battle of wills. Jada watched in silence, her heart racing, torn between fear for her father and admiration for his bravery. She had always known he was strong, but seeing him stand up to this man filled her with hope. Suddenly, the tension in the room exploded when Wallace shoved Marcus back, taking a step forward. "You're just another angry black man. I've seen your type before," he sneered, trying to incite Marcus. But Marcus stood his ground, every ounce of his being focused on protecting Jada. "Don't you dare speak about my family that way," Marcus replied, his voice steady but laced with fury. "You are the one who is wrong here, and I will make sure you face the consequences." The air crackled with hostility as the two men faced off, both knowing that this was more than just a confrontation. It was a clash of values, a battle for justice against a backdrop of prejudice. Marcus could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, fueled by the desperation to save his daughter from this nightmare. Just then, another officer entered the room, sensing the escalating tension. "What's going on here?" he asked, confusion evident on his face. The presence of a third party shifted the dynamic, and Marcus seized the opportunity. "I want to file a complaint against Officer Wallace," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "My daughter is innocent, and this cop is abusing his power." After the explosive confrontation, the atmosphere in the precinct was thick with tension. Marcus stood there, his heart pounding, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Jada sat at the table, wide-eyed and shaken, but relieved to have her father by her side. She had seen the fear in his eyes, and it only fueled her anxiety. "Dad, what's going to happen now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus turned to her, trying to muster a reassuring smile. "We're going to fix this, Jada. You're safe now." But deep inside, a storm brewed. The thought of how Officer Wallace had treated his daughter ignited a fire within him. It wasn't just about the moment in the interrogation room. It was about a larger pattern of racism and abuse that had to be addressed. He could not let this incident slip into the shadows, where so many similar cases had been forgotten. As they left the precinct, Marcus felt a mix of anger and determination. He held Jada's hand tightly, guiding her through the bustling streets. The world outside felt different. The vibrant colors of the city seemed muted by the weight of the injustice they had faced. He could sense Jada's unease, the way she glanced around as if the very air was filled with danger. "Let's go home," he said, his voice firm. "We need to regroup." Once at home, Marcus locked the door behind them and leaned against it for a moment, closing his eyes. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He couldn't let Jada see how rattled he truly felt. "I'm going to make sure Wallace pays for what he did," he said, more to himself than to her. Jada nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and trust. She had always known her father to be a man of action, someone who fought for what was right. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Marcus plunged into gathering evidence, talking to witnesses, and consulting legal experts. He reached out to colleagues at the FBI, sharing what had happened. To his surprise, several of them were eager to help. They understood that this was not just about his daughter. It was about holding a rogue officer accountable for his actions. As he sifted through witness statements, Marcus learned that Wallace had a history of troubling behavior. Reports from previous incidents painted a disturbing picture of an officer who abused his power, but the system had failed to act. This revelation only intensified Marcus's resolve. He could not let his daughter's experience be another statistic, another name in a list of ignored complaints. One evening, as he sat in his home office, the glow of the computer screen illuminating his face, he received a message from a fellow agent. "I have some contacts at the local news station. They'd be willing to hear your story." Marcus felt a surge of hope. Public attention could shine a light on this dark corner of police misconduct. He knew that the more people who knew about Jada's experience, the harder it would be for the department to sweep it under the rug. That weekend, Marcus and Jada sat down with a reporter. The cameras rolled as he recounted the events of that fateful day, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This isn't just about my daughter. It's about every person who has been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. We need to hold those in power accountable." Jada sat beside him, her eyes bright with determination, her courage inspiring him to push forward. But with the story going public, the backlash was immediate. Wallace's supporters rallied, attempting to discredit Marcus and Jada. They claimed that she was just a rebellious teenager looking for trouble. Social media exploded with vitriol, accusations flying like arrows. "They're trying to silence us," Marcus told Jada one evening, his frustration palpable. "But we can't let them." Determined to push through the negativity, Marcus focused on the facts. He continued to work with the media, sharing their story and gathering more support. Each interview he gave brought in new voices, individuals who had faced similar abuses. It was as if a dam had broken, allowing a flood of testimonies to pour out, each one adding weight to their cause. But as they gained traction, Marcus felt the heat rising. Threats began to emerge, veiled in anonymity. "You're making a mistake, Thompson," one message warned. "You don't know who you're messing with." The implications hung in the air like a dark cloud. Jada sensed her father's tension, the way his jaw clenched as he read the messages. "Dad, are you scared?" she asked one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," he replied, though doubt flickered in his heart. "I'm angry." With the community rallying behind them, Marcus pushed forward, determined to see justice served. He organized a peaceful protest, inviting those who had faced injustice to stand together. The day arrived, and the streets filled with people holding signs demanding accountability. Marcus stood at the front, his heart swelling with pride and determination. The protest was peaceful, but the police presence was overwhelming. As they marched, chanting for justice, Marcus caught sight of Officer Wallace standing off to the side, arms crossed, his face twisted in anger. The sight of him fueled Marcus's resolve. He felt a wave of anger wash over him, the memories of Jada's fear pushing him forward. "Today is about more than just us," he shouted into the megaphone, his voice ringing out over the crowd. "It's about standing up against oppression, standing together against those who think they can bully us. We will not be silenced." The courtroom was filled with tension as Marcus sat at the front, flanked by his attorney and Jada, who sat quietly beside him. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, as people shuffled in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. Today, Officer Wallace would face justice for his actions, and Marcus could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on him. The gavel struck, and the judge entered, signaling the start of the proceedings. Marcus's heart raced as he watched Wallace walk in, his face a mask of arrogance. He wore a crisp uniform, a reminder of the authority he wielded. As he took his seat, the smirk on his face sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. This man had made Jada feel powerless, and now he sat there, exuding an air of confidence that infuriated Marcus. As the trial began, the prosecution laid out the facts of the case, detailing the events of that day in the interrogation room. Witnesses were called to testify, their voices shaking as they recounted what they had seen. Each account painted a clearer picture of Wallace's aggressive behavior, and with each testimony, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they would finally get the justice they sought. But as the defense began to present its case, the atmosphere shifted. Wallace's attorney was smooth and calculated, his arguments sharp and biting. This was a simple case of misunderstanding, he argued, his voice echoing through the courtroom. Officer Wallace was merely doing his job, and any actions taken were in response to a perceived threat. The words hung in the air, and Marcus clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. He could see the jury's faces shifting, their expressions uncertain as they absorbed the defense's narrative. Jada squeezed his hand, her eyes wide with fear. "Dad, what if they believe him?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Stay strong, Jada," Marcus replied, though doubt gnawed at his insides. He knew how easily a story could be twisted, especially in the hands of a skilled lawyer. It was a game of words, and right now, it felt like they were losing. The days of the trial dragged on, each session unveiling more layers of the case. Marcus listened intently as the defense tried to undermine Jada's credibility. She was just a rebellious teenager, Wallace's lawyer said, his tone dripping with disdain. How can we trust her account of what happened? Each accusation felt like a dagger, aimed directly at their family's integrity. During breaks, Marcus and Jada would huddle together, discussing the day's events. "I can't believe he's trying to paint me as the villain," Jada said, her voice filled with frustration. "I was just a kid." "I know, honey," Marcus soothed, wrapping an arm around her. "But we need to stay focused. We have to show the jury the truth." As the trial continued, public interest grew. News outlets covered the case, and social media exploded with opinions. Supporters rallied outside the courthouse, holding signs that read "Justice for Jada" and "End police brutality." Each day, the crowd outside swelled, a tangible reminder that they were not alone in this fight. However, the attention also drew threats. Marcus received anonymous messages warning him to back off. "You're making a big mistake, Thompson," one ominous note read. "Leave this alone, or you'll regret it." He felt the chill of fear creep up his spine, but he refused to let it control him. He had to protect his daughter, to show her that they could stand up against injustice, no matter the cost. As the trial reached its climax, the final witnesses took the stand. One of Jada's friends, who had been in the area during the incident, recounted what she saw. Her testimony was passionate, painting a vivid picture of the fear that had gripped Jada during the ordeal. "She was just trying to get home," the friend said, tears welling in her eyes. "No one deserves to be treated like that." Marcus felt a surge of pride as he watched Jada's friend speak. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the chance to reclaim Jada's narrative. But Wallace's attorney was quick to counter. "You're just a teenager looking for attention, aren't you?" He shot back, his voice dripping with contempt. The courtroom gasped, and Marcus felt his blood boil. How dare he belittle the truth? The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as the prosecution presented its closing arguments. Marcus leaned forward, hanging on every word. The lead prosecutor stood tall, passionately declaring, "This case isn't just about one officer's actions. It's about the systemic issues within law enforcement that allow abuse to thrive. We must hold those in power accountable." The jury listened intently, and Marcus could see them exchanging glances, their faces betraying uncertainty. He felt a mix of hope and fear wash over him. What if they didn't see the truth? What if Wallace walked free? As the judge instructed the jury to deliberate, Marcus's heart raced. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the future of their family hanging in the balance. The waiting was unbearable. Hours felt like days as they paced the corridors outside the courtroom, anxiety gnawing at their insides. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the jury returned. The tension in the room was palpable as the foreman stood to deliver the verdict. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing the hope and fear swirling inside him. Would justice prevail? The gavel fell, marking the end of the trial, but for Marcus and Jetta, it felt like a beginning shrouded in uncertainty. The jury had delivered their verdict, and the words echoed in Marcus's mind, "Not guilty." It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving only a suffocating silence. Jada's face went pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. The tension that had held them captive for weeks now morphed into a heavy sorrow that wrapped around them like a shroud. As they left the courthouse, the reality of the verdict hit them like a tidal wave. Reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing as they called out questions. "What's your reaction to the verdict? How do you feel about the jury's decision?" Marcus felt anger boiling inside him, but he kept his composure for Jada's sake. "We have nothing to say right now," he managed to say, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Once outside, they were greeted by a crowd of supporters. Signs waved in the air, chanting slogans of justice and equality. Some people cried, others shouted in outrage. Yet, amidst the noise, there was a sense of solidarity. They were not alone. Marcus took a deep breath, grounding himself in the support of their community. But even as the cheers rang out, doubt lingered in his mind. Would this support continue now that the verdict had come in? Back home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The celebration felt distant as Marcus and Jada sat in silence, grappling with their emotions. Jada's eyes brimmed with tears as she spoke, her voice trembling. "Dad, why didn't they believe me? I told the truth." Her pain cut deep, a reminder of how easily the truth could be overshadowed by authority. "I don't know, Jetta," Marcus replied softly, his heart aching for her. "But we will keep fighting. We can't let this define us." He wanted to be the rock for his daughter, yet he felt the weight of their struggle pressing down on him, threatening to crush his spirit. Days turned into weeks, and the media frenzy slowly faded, leaving behind a sense of abandonment. Marcus and Jada felt the isolation keenly. Friends who once reached out seemed to pull away, unsure of how to navigate the aftermath of the trial. It was as if the world had moved on, leaving them behind in a painful limbo. In the evenings, Marcus would often find Jada lost in thought, staring out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. He knew she was processing everything: the fear, the injustice, the betrayal. He tried to encourage her to talk about it, but she often shook her head, saying she was fine. Yet he could see the shadows of doubt and sadness lurking just beneath the surface. One night, as they sat in the living room, Marcus decided to confront the reality they faced. "Jada, we need to talk about how you're feeling. Bottling this up isn't going to help." He turned to her, hoping to break through the wall she had built around her heart. "I'm just tired, Dad," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought we could make a difference, but now it feels like nothing will change." His heart ached for her struggle. "I know it feels that way now, but change takes time. We have to keep fighting, not just for you, but for everyone who's been hurt like you." Jada nodded, her resolve wavering but still present. Together, they began to strategize. They attended community meetings, sharing their story and calling for change in police practices. Marcus was determined to ensure that their experience was not just a momentary headline, but a catalyst for dialogue. He reached out to local activists, using social media to amplify their voices. As they engaged with their community, Marcus noticed something shifting. People were beginning to pay attention, to ask questions, and to demand accountability from law enforcement. The dialogue around policing and racial justice sparked new discussions in their town, and Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe their struggle was not in vain after all. But just as things began to gain momentum, Trouble struck again. One evening, Marcus received a phone call that sent his heart racing. "Mr. Thompson, we need you to come down to the precinct. There's been an incident." Panic gripped him as he hung up, quickly gathering Jada and driving to the station. What could have happened now? When they arrived, the scene was chaotic. Officers moved briskly, whispers of another confrontation filling the air. Marcus's heart sank as he learned that a peaceful protest had turned violent. Supporters of Jada had gathered outside the precinct, demanding justice for her and for all those affected by police brutality. But things escalated, and officers were called to disperse the crowd. The fear of history repeating itself hung heavy in the air. Marcus and Jada stood outside, watching as tension crackled like electricity. The crowd was a mix of anger and determination, their chants echoing through the night. Marcus felt a rush of emotion, pride mingled with fear for the safety of those he cared about. Jada's hands trembled beside him, a reflection of the storm inside her. As night fell, the situation intensified. Marcus could see the fear on the faces of the protesters, and it mirrored his own. He turned to Jada, gripping her shoulders gently. "Stay close to me. We can't lose each other again." She nodded, her eyes wide, taking in the scene unfolding before them. Suddenly, the tension reached a breaking point. Officers formed a line, pushing back against the protesters. The shouts grew louder, demands for justice rising above the chaos. In that moment, everything felt surreal, as if they were living in a nightmare from which they couldn't wake. Marcus's instincts kicked in. "We need to get out of here," he urged Jada, sensing the impending danger. They moved toward the car, but the scene behind them exploded into chaos. The air filled with the sounds of shouts, sirens, and confusion. People began to scatter, some crying out in fear as the situation escalated.